Hello, welcome to Hope Church Harrogate's Message of the Week. If you'd like to connect with us, please head over to hopeharrogate.co.uk/connect. We'd love to hear from you.
Good morning. My name's Dan, as has been said a couple of times. If you're not sure who's at the front, Dan is a good guest today. Last week, Rob spoke to us about Caleb, someone not often spoken about in the Bible. Today, I'm going to talk about someone else, but just want to start off with a quick question to get your minds working. Obviously, the answer is Jesus, but if we take Jesus out of the picture for a second, as we often do in church, doesn't quite seem right, does it? Apart from Jesus, who do you think the most powerful person in this room is? Anyone want to name anyone? Still Jesus. The Holy Spirit, very good. That's a good answer. Not really sure what power looks like. Maybe me right now. I've got the microphone, so that gives me power, doesn't it? Jonathan, he can tell me. Oh, God. It's Jonathan, it turns out. Very good. Very good. Okay, what if I asked, who is the most powerful person in this country? Someone at the Bank of England, someone in politics, the King. Good answer. Jude Bellingham, could be. If he said something, I'm sure everyone would do it. What about who's the most powerful person in the world, do you think? Trump, Infantino, probably not. Elon Musk, maybe. Yeah, depressing answers, aren't they? We are going to read a story about one of the most powerful people in the world back in his time. It's the Pharaoh of Egypt. He's the king of Egypt, basically. I can't actually remember his name, but we'll read the story. I'm sure his name will be in there somewhere. Could we have the story up for us? It's Exodus 1, in case you want to read along in your Bibles, starting from chapter 8. It says, then a new king, to whom Joseph meant nothing. So Joseph had been moved into Egypt many years ago. Joseph had died. A new generation has come through. A new king, whom Joseph meant nothing, came to power in Egypt. Look, he said to his people, the Israelites have become far too numerous for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous. And if war breaks out, we'll join our enemies, fight against us, and leave the country. So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor, and they built Pithom and Ramesses as store cities for Pharaoh. Haven't worked out his name yet, have you? But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread. So the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites and worked them ruthlessly. They made their lives bitter with harsh labor in brick and mortar and with all kinds of work in the fields. In all their harsh labor, the Egyptians worked them ruthlessly. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, whose names were Shiphrah and Puah, when you are helping the Hebrew women during childbirth on the delivery stool, if you see that the baby is a boy, kill him. But if it is a girl, let her live. The midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let the boys live. Then the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live? The midwives answered Pharaoh, Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives arrive. So God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became even more numerous. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. Then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people. Every Hebrew boy that is born, you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live. What's Pharaoh's name? Wasn't in there. Whose names are in there? The Puah, who I found out from my daughter this morning is actually the name of the pig in Moana. In case you needed to know another Puah, but we're not doing that one. We're doing the Hebrew midwives, Puah and Shiphrah. Their names are in there. So actually, let's talk about them today rather than Pharaoh, because we assume that Pharaoh is the most powerful person in the story, but turns out this story, quite gruesome, also quite silly. We're going to read it again. We're going to go through the passage. I'm just going to highlight a few things for you. Pharaoh says, let's deal shrewdly with the Israelites. It's the same word for wise, but when it's kind of in a negative context, we call it shrewd. And being shrewd means that the situation's complex, but you can kind of see how to work all angles to get the outcome that you want. That's what it means to be shrewd. You can work a situation to your advantage. His kind of shrewdness doesn't seem to particularly work. He oppresses the people, but they continue to multiply, the very thing he was trying to stop. And the words shrewd and multiply should kind of ring some familiar bells for you. If you've read the beginning of Genesis, who's called shrewd at the beginning of Genesis? The snake, the serpent. And who is called to multiply? Adam and Eve, yeah. So this is kind of just a continuation of that story from Genesis. You've got one side that's shrewd, one side is multiplying. The enslavement didn't work. They carried on multiplying. He tried to intimidate the women. That didn't work so well either, because you see that God continues to multiply, and it says specifically, Shiphrah and Puah were part of that. They got their own families. They were part of the multiplication. I've got a little Venn diagram to show. If on one side we've got all the things that God approves of, on the other side we've got all the things that God disapproves of. Like being kind and being generous on the approval side, stealing, dishonoring your parents on the bad side. In the middle, spending money, depends what you're spending your money on. And going on boat journeys. We think about Noah, good boat journey. Think about Jonah, bad journey. Going on boat journeys, sometimes good, sometimes bad. Murdering babies, where do we put that one? Because Shiphrah and Puah didn't go to God and go, oh, should we do this? Is this right, God? Should we follow what Pharaoh says? And they didn't need a big booming voice from God saying, actually, I don't really approve of murdering babies. Didn't need that. They feared God. They knew already what God's commands was. There was no big prayer, no big prophecy. And it says they feared God more than they feared Pharaoh. And actually, if we go back to the passage and just skip on a little bit to where this bit, this is the silly bit of the story. The midwives answered Pharaoh, Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives arrive. And it might be true, One nation has enslaved another nation. So you've got one set of women who are used to hard labor. Maybe they do kind of cope with the physical demands of labor better than the Egyptian women who maybe have become a bit lazy and have to have a bit more. I don't know how these things work. But maybe there was some truth in it. But imagine you're the midwives and you go, oh, your baby's been delivered already. I guess I can't kill it then. This is not an excuse for disobeying Pharaoh, really. The baby's already here. Oh, nothing I can do. It's kind of a silly reason to give to Pharaoh of why they couldn't follow through with his command. And yet it seems to trick him. And when you're going, well, who in this situation has been shrewd and wise? Who has managed to get the right outcome of how they've navigated a complex situation and come out unscathed on the other side? It's the midwives are the shrewd ones, right? They're the ones that have got the right outcome out of the situation. This is a bit of a silly story while being quite gruesome at the same time. And how does Pharaoh respond? He says, right, okay, all my people, I say, right, every adult in the room, you're my people now. Grab a baby boy near you. We're off to Brimham Rocks. We're going to throw him off the top. That's quite an escalation already, right? From what was already a high bar of ordering the execution of newborn babies, he's somehow escalated even higher than that. But not so bothered about the girls. Women, no threat to him. Not bothered. Girls can live. What could women possibly do to him? And yet we've just seen Shiphrah and Puah outwit him. They've won the situation. And if you were to read the story a little bit further, you'd go on to see Moses' mother, Moses' sister, Pharaoh's daughter's maidservant, go on to kind of collude to deliver this baby, who ironically is actually put into the Nile River, just like he commanded. The baby goes into the river, but these women all act to save this baby's life, including Pharaoh's own daughter. He was not worried about women, and yet it's the women who have defeated his purposes and raised this baby who will eventually lead the people to freedom. So, what's the message of the story? What should we take away? Well, I think probably is you should defy authority. This is a good thing. God likes it. If someone in charge tells you what to do, ignore it because it's probably not right. We see that story here. We see that story in the story of Esther. We see that story in the story of Daniel in the lion's den. He refused to do what the king said, and everything turned out well. So, if anyone important tells you what to do, ignore it. It's in the Bible. I will just test that theory, because in the Bible, if we see something that we think is right, and we see how we think God has revealed himself, we can see it most clearly in the life of Jesus. So if we think we've seen something about God, we should see it even more when we look at Jesus. And we should see it the most when we look at the cross. So let's just check some passages from the New Testament, just to make sure that we're on the right track here. So Jesus said, when he was asked about taxes, give back to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's. Okay. So you should actually respect Caesar, even though he was a bad king as well. Okay. Is there another one? This is in Romans. This is Paul writing. Paul's learned everything that Jesus had to teach. And he says, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted. I'm not so sure anymore. Have we got another one, though? Submit yourself for the Lord's sake to every human authority. Okay. So we've tested it, and maybe it's not quite as black and white as I thought. Maybe Shiphrah and Puah and Esther and Daniel, maybe these stories are the exception rather than the rule. So we need to look at a different application for this story. So when we read the Bible, if we look at what the characters in the story are doing and try and say, well, therefore that's what we should do, it's quite a dangerous sort of thing. Characters in the Bible make loads of mistakes. We can come out with some weird messages when we try and learn that. It's not always clear in the Bible if what the characters do is actually right or wrong in God's eyes. It doesn't always tell you straight away. Just because there's a good outcome doesn't even mean it was the right thing to do. And because it was right in one situation doesn't necessarily mean it was right in another situation either. So maybe instead of asking, what should we copy in the characters, we should ask the question, well, what can I learn about God in this story? Because God doesn't change. And what he does in one situation is always good, always just, always true, always right. God's actually barely mentioned in the story of Shiphrah and Puah, though. So we see God's purposes being worked out throughout the whole story, even though he's not really kind of acting directly. When we take a step back, we can really see that God was in charge all the way through, even though he must have looked to everyone there like Pharaoh was in charge. And so maybe there's this passage from 1 Corinthians. I hope I've got one. Yes. God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. I think maybe this is the message we're supposed to get from the story of Shiphrah and Puah. That even when it looks like God is not in charge, we can still trust that he is. And if we're willing to fear God more than we fear any other authority, then God can use us for his purposes. If we look at the life of Jesus and test out this truth, do we see maybe there was a storm on a boat where it looked like everyone was about to drown, but God was still in charge? Do we see ultimately at the cross that it looked like darkness was winning? It looked like Barabbas had been freed, a corrupt Sanhedrin put on a sham trial to convict Jesus to a criminal execution. And it looked like to everyone that the bad guys were winning. And Jesus actually died. But through it all, we see that God was in charge. He was using the weak things to put the strong things to shame. Just like David slayed Goliath, just like the lamb defeats the dragon, and just like the midwives defeat Pharaoh, this baby who escaped a genocide of his generation was put to death, and he overcame every weapon of the enemy in order to defeat the powers of darkness through his love and self-sacrifice. Does that sound like something that we can carry in our lives and know the truth of and influence how we live? Does it seem like something we want to remember and celebrate and commemorate? What better way to celebrate that and remember it and commemorate it than at the communion table? When we drink the bread, drink the juice, wine, and we eat the bread, we remember what Jesus has done. We remember that although it may look like God is not in charge, he is in every situation. And so we're going to go and do communion a little bit differently today. As if your bum's getting a bit wiggly, then it's time to move, because we can't have food and drink on the ballet floor down here. And so just at the back on that side, there is a big table with bread and juice on it. And there's a small table just around behind the door with gluten-free if you need that. And we're going to go out and just in a group of, 6 people, 10 people, just gather as a small group and take communion together. And there's a Bible verse that I've got, again, it's just 3 verses, so it's nice and short. But if someone wants to find it on their phone or in their Bible and have it ready, then I would love you in your groups just to read this very short passage together and then eat the bread and drink the wine together. And just we'll celebrate this together as a family. We'll come back. I'm sure that there are many people in this room that if at the beginning of this morning, if I'd said, did you know that God is always in charge? You'd have said, yeah, of course we know that. But there are so many situations where it looks like God isn't, where when I ask who the most powerful person in the room is, you would go, yeah, I'm not sure that's what good God would have necessarily wanted, or situations across the world, but also situations in our own lives where it can feel like it's not God who's in charge. It can feel like some kind of Pharaoh-like figure is in charge in our lives. And so I'm going to pray for all of us now that we would just know the deep truth of God's power in every situation. But also at the end, I'm just going to ask that the prayer team are going to gather on one side. So we'll have maybe Ruth with us praying over one side, prayer team on another side, and maybe more things going on as well. But if you are in a situation you feel like it's really hard to see how God is in charge, it feels like darkness is winning in my life, then it can be really helpful to pray with someone. So if you want to make it more personal and have someone to pray with, then there'll be an opportunity to do that later. I'm just going to pray that, God, would you come powerfully by your Spirit? Would you make yourself known to us? Would you reveal to us things that are unseen? And just give us that deep confidence that you are in charge in every situation. And that even though Pharaoh may still be on the throne, and even though there may still be a people throwing newborn, vulnerable babies into the Nile, Even though terrible things around us are happening, just give us that deep confidence that you are ultimately in charge and that you'll have your way. You are working all things to the good of those who love you.